people would say, no, he's just against the drunks. You're crazy. That's not a bias against all drivers. He said he's against drunk drivers.
Right.
That, as stupid as it is exactly what's happening, and egged on by the Khalistanis in Canada. That's exactly what's happening, is that if you say you disapprove, if you don't want to stand there with the Khalistan flags, then people will say, you're a racist. You'll be called a racist, I can guarantee you that, and an anti-Sikh, as though the Sikhs are all Khalistanis, which they're not. But let me add just one more point before I shut up, and that is that standing next to a Khalistan flag doesn't bother me. We have freedom of speech. Fly the flag, march down the street and say, Khalistan Zindabad, long live Khalistan. Fine with me. I'm for free speech. Why not? And Canada has adopted that position for many years. The problem is a separate one. It's not about the flags. That's an expression of political opinion which may be controversial but hardly fatal. It's the pictures, the martyr pictures of the mass murdering terrorists who are held up as models for Sikh youth, martyrs of the Sikh nation, leaders, men that we should look up to include the ubiquitous portrayal of Talvinder Parmar, the Air India bomber of 1985, who slaughtered 331 completely innocent civilians who had nothing whatsoever to do with his battle for Khalistan, and is revered today as a Shahid Jatidar, a leader and a martyr. That is the glorification of terrorism and an incitement which should not be allowed, in my view.
I was just going to lead to that part, which is the fact that you have Talwinder Singh Parmar, the Air India bombing mastermind, be glorified at these events where Canadian politicians are present, where the military and the RCMP are recruiting. It does send a very strange message. And the question I have about this is why is this? Why is a man like Parmar glorified at these events and glorified by Khalistanis? I'm assuming that not all Sikhs glorify this man, but of course Khalistanis clearly do. Why is that the case? And I'm pretty sure, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Terry, but I think you were interviewing Jagmeet Singh, and when he was, or maybe when he had just conceded that Parmar was behind the Air India bombing, for a while he didn't agree that Parmar was actually the mastermind.
Yeah, it was kind of the other way around. It was I think the day after he won the leadership, and he did not acknowledge that Parmar did blow up Air India. And he did not condemn the display of martyr posters glorifying this mass murdering terrorist, Canada's worst ever mass murderer, given 5 opportunities to do so in that interview. And it took 5 months to correct his view. He eventually came around to saying that it was a very fair question, and that, he now understood that Parmar was indeed the author of the Air India bombing. But you're asking about why does this happen, and the answer is that if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile, is the old expression. So back in the day when I first started wailing about this 20 years ago, they would put little 8x10 pictures on the parade floats in the Baisakhi parade going by, and these pictures would show their famous martyrs. The assassins of Indira Gandhi, the assassins of General Vaidya, who led the Indian Army at the Golden Temple in '84, the assassins of Bayant Singh, the Chief Minister of Punjab, who put an end to the insurgency in '95, and so on. They looked around and they saw that nobody said anything about it. Nobody objected to the display of these pictures. So the next year they came back with bigger pictures. And the next year they came back with a life-size glamour photo with ornate ceremonial sword and sky-high turban of Parmar fixed permanently to the outside wall of an important Gurdwara in Surrey, British Columbia. So, having done all of that for years, who's going to come along now and say, well, my party and his party and her party, we've all blown it. We've all made a mistake here. And we should stop showing up if these events are going to show those pictures. Imagine the impact. They think that they might lose votes. What they're afraid of, Canadian politicians have always been afraid that if they are the exception and they step up and say, I'm not going to go to your Vaisakhi parade if you're going to show these appalling pictures. This is a disgrace. And I'm going to bet that I can win more votes by opposing it than I can by looking the other way, as they routinely do at Vaisakhi parades. I think that impact would be considerable, and I think there might even be a rush of other politicians to join in. There's one more thing, and I'm sorry to go on this question. It's another key question. And that is that there's always an excuse that has been offered by the Khalistanis when you ask, why are you doing this? This is revolting. This is a disgrace. They say, but he's innocent. And a lot of politicians grab that excuse and run with it. Well, there's no consensus, they say to me. They say he didn't do it. Well, I'm afraid after the Air India trial, that just won't wash. It's bolted down. It's nailed down every which way. I won't get started. Don't get me started, I advise you, on the extent of the concrete, hard evidence, sworn and tested in public in both a criminal trial and a couple of other criminal trials and a judicial inquiry, about 10 years all put together of judicial examination of these facts. And I do mean facts. Show that this excuse that, he was innocent, he didn't do it. The Indian government blew up their own plane. This sort of conspiracy nonsense. Nonsense is what it is. But that helps to keep the politicians in the fold, right? It gives them an excuse. Well, he didn't do it. He didn't do it. So what's your beef?
Well, beside the pictures of Parmar as a shaheed, they also have Hardeep Singh Nijjar as a martyr at these events as well. And for Canadians who've been following this, that name may sound familiar. He was the Gurdwara leader who was gunned down in Surrey last year, I believe it was. And the Canadian government accused the Indian government of being behind the assassination. And there were a group of four men who have just been charged with that murder. Now, we've been told, Terry, that this man was either a terrorist leader or he was a plumber. And from your position, which was he? Who really was Hardeep Singh Nijjar?
Well, he wasn't much of a plumber. He didn't seem to be working at it full time. And he wasn't much of a terrorist either, because the Indians never managed to produce the kind of evidence that I just spoke of in my previous answer. In the case of the Air India bombing and all years of examination, we've got the evidence up, down, and sideways of his guilt and of those who assisted in his enterprise. With Nijjar, he's accused in the Ludhiana cinema bombing, and so he's accused of a lot of things. And traditionally, just as Canada has fallen short in responding to Indian requests for the rendition of wanted terrorists, as the Indians call it, Canada has fallen short. I mean, Canada refused an Indian request to extradite Parmar, the Air India bomber, in 1982, when Pierre Trudeau was in office, for the murder of 2 policemen in Punjab. So, we're not talking about handing out leaflets. We're talking about serious criminal activity. And Canada said no. So Canada has fallen short in responding to Indian requests, but India has also fallen short in assuming that, just because they say, well, we want him, he's a terrorist. Yeah, but where's your evidence? And very often they have failed to produce what would convince either a Canadian or British or American courts. They've had a problem all over the world, in fact, in getting these people sent back to India because of the lack of evidence that they offer.
I want to go back to the political